we'll get the recording started first. Thank you.
That should record.
That's you now, Provost.
Okay, good to go. Right, firstly, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your attendance here this evening. Just before we kick off, can I just briefly go through the usual rules of participation, given that we're still doing these meetings online. We have a motion tonight, so I'll just deal with that as we did with Councillor Wallace's motion, and was it May or June, whenever it was, before the elections. So even if there's no amendments to the motion, I will allow people to speak to it if they wish. So I'll stick to the normal time rules for the motion itself, but for general participation, you know, be as liberal as I can be in terms of allowing you to speak, but I would hope nobody would abuse that privilege. Can I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and will be published on the Council's YouTube channel in due course. Okay, I think we have a few apologies for absence here this evening. Can I just pass the aim to list all the councillors who have intimated that they can't be present?
Thank you, Provost. Yes, we do have a few apologies this evening. We've got Deputy Provost Cunningham, Councillors Aitken, Convery, Devlin, McLean and O'Kane.
Councillor Swift as well. No feeling well today.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, we're still
Thank you very
close.
much. Yes, we're fine, Provost. You're all right.
Okay. Right, can we move on then? Item number 2, declarations of interest. Again, the Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any financial or non-financial interest they may have in any of the items on the agenda this evening. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Okay. Can I move now to the minute volume? Can I remind you that item 3, the minute of the council, is just simply for noting as a correct record, not for opening a debate. And when we come to item 4, I propose just to go through them as I've done with the last meetings for the particular papers on the date. So if you have any points on the minute, if you can raise them just as we go through the paper and have the page number at hand, I think it makes it much easier for people to follow. Okay, so item number 3 is the minute of the meeting of the council held on 8th September 2021, and it's here for confirmation that it's a correct record of the meeting. Does anybody have any issues in the accuracy of the minute? All happy with it? Thank you very much. Can we move on to the minute volume in item 4? And as I say, I will go through them just one by one. The first note of the meeting is the Cabinet of 9th September, page 1635. Does anybody have any issues of accuracy or questions in the minute? Don't see any hands up. Okay, can I move on to the Cabinet Police and Fire of 10th September? The Audit and Scrutiny Committee of the 23rd of September. No, the Planning Applications Committee of the 29th of September. Any hands? Education Committee of the 30th of September. The Cabinet Paper of the 7th of October. The Appointments Committee Paper of the 14th of October. And lastly, the Cabinet Paper of 21st October. All content with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any hands, so I take it that the minutes are a true record of those meetings. Thank you very much for that. and move on to item number 5. Item number 5, as you will be aware, is a notice of motion from Councillors Ireland and Bamforth. So what I will do is first of all establish if there is an amendment to the motion. So before I invite Councillor Bamforth to, Councillor Ireland to speak to it, can I just check, does anybody have an amendment to the motion? Councillor Wallace. Yep.
Could you maybe explain how it works? I mean, obviously we would like to hear what the councillors have to say, and it could well be after that we wish to have an amendment. Is that how it works? Oh, did I say something to offend somebody?
Right. I mean, as I say, it's really to establish at the start if there were any amendments. If there aren't any amendments at the moment, what I will do is just then invite Councillor Ireland to either read out the motion if she wants to in full, it's fairly lengthy, or just simply note it and then speak to it with her 10 minutes and invite Councillor Bamforth to second it. But even if there aren't any amendments at that stage, as I say, I'm happy to let councillors speak to it. Normally, if there are no amendments, you would just simply accept the motion. So I'm really just saying it's open for comment or debate if anybody wishes to make a comment at that point. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I did just to make sure that if there's anything that Councillor Ireland may have to say during it that maybe warrants the need for an amendment, it's okay for us to put, or for me to put an amendment in at that time. Asking the question.
Provost, can I come in relation to that?
Yep. Yep.
I mean, in effect, what's being considered by the council this evening is the motion that's in front of the councillors, and anything that Councillor Ireland was to say is really not relevant, because what you're considering is what's on your printed agenda. That's why we need any amendments made at the start of the discussion. So it's not the case that she may say something during the meeting which would then lead to an amendment, because in effect what you're discussing is what's printed on the papers in front of you.
Okay, so in essence you need the amendment now. That's correct then, Mr. Daly, yes?
That's correct, Provost.
Okay. Councillor Wallace, then, do you wish to make an amendment? No.
In the anticipation that Councillor Ireland isn't going to say anything that perhaps negates the need for an amendment, I shall put forward this amendment, if I may. Okay. Which is, in the face of challenging circumstances of a pandemic, this council recognises and supports the efforts made by council officers to ensure East Renfrewshire Council plays its part in the global fight against climate change.
Okay. I don't know, have you got that?
I didn't. Councillor Wallace, do you happen to have a printed version of that? You could email me so I could share that with members, or if you could repeat it for me, please.
I'll stick it in the post if you wish.
I really need it for this evening.
Okay, right. Okay, you would like me to...
If you could reread it for me, please.
Yes, of course. Okay. In the face of challenging circumstances of a pandemic,
okay,
this council recognises
okay,
and supports
yep,
the efforts made
okay,
by council officers
yep, okay,
to ensure
yep,
East Renfrewshire Council
yep,
plays its part
okay,
in the global fight
yep, okay,
against climate change.
Okay, thank you. I'll just read that back to you, Councillor Wallace, to make sure I've picked you up properly. In the face of challenging circumstances of a pandemic, this council recognises and supports the efforts made by council officers to ensure East Renfrewshire Council plays its part in the global fight against climate change.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, now I do need a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Wallace, is somebody prepared to second it? Councillor Grant?
Yes, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Wallace's amendment.
Okay, thank you for that. So procedure is we have an amendment which is duly seconded. So the procedure will be I will invite Councillor Ireland to speak to the main motion, and then for seconder, Councillor Bamforth, if she wishes to speak to it. Councillor Ireland is 10 minutes, Councillor Bamforth 5 minutes, everybody else is 5 minutes. I will then invite Councillor Wallace to speak to his amendment after that, and Councillor Grant, if she wishes to speak as well, and then it's open to all other councillors for debate. Okay, so could I invite Councillor Ireland to move her motion?
Thank you very much, Provost. Can I just check something with Councillor Wallace before I start? The amendment that you've proposed, is that in substitution of the entire motion, or is that to be added to the motion? And if so, is it to be added at the start or the middle or at the end? I think that was just the only clarification I was looking for.
You can be assured to completely substitute everything in your.
It's a substitution of the motion that's in front of us.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Provost, is it okay with yourself if I don't read the entire motion but speak to it? It's quite a lengthy motion.
I notice. I think everybody would be delighted if we just went straight into the debate. Yes.
Thank you very much, Provost. It is quite lengthy. Well, just to speak to it, over the past many months, we've faced a very hard fight against a global pandemic, and it's right that our focus was on supporting local residents at this very difficult time. Indeed, the council officers deserve our wholehearted thanks for working under incredibly difficult circumstances. It's undeniable, though, that we're facing a global climate emergency. And unfortunately, since COVID began, the threat of global warming has not receded. If anything, it has intensified. Tonight, we will hopefully take the step of declaring a climate emergency in East Renfrewshire, one which I hope will receive cross-party support, as it certainly isn't a party political issue. This coming Sunday in our neighbouring council, one of the most important gatherings of this century will get underway. The leaders of more than 100 countries from around the world will gather in Glasgow, and the outcome of the summit will shape the future of the planet that we live on. Discussions will centre, as they very rightly should, around how we move from an unsustainable present to a greener and much fairer future. The vital necessity of making this transition quickly and fairly must be the message that comes out of COP26. This September, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres very worryingly stated that climate alarm bells are ringing at fever pitch, and that if emissions are not cut more than currently planned, that we face a hellscape of temperature rises. This is quite frankly terrifying, and of course we will not escape the impact of climate change here in Scotland and subsequently East Renfrewshire. Over the past few decades, Scotland has experienced a warming trend, shifting rainfall patterns and rising sea levels. In fact, our 10 warmest years on record have all occurred since 1997, and there has been an increase in rainfall over Scotland in the past decades, with very worryingly an increasing proportion coming from heavy and intense rainfall events. I think certainly we're all seeing that in our correspondence over the last few years. We will quite simply experience greater weather extremes. As Scotland begins to recover from the pandemic, the effects of climate change will continue to be felt, and we must be prepared for these to increase over coming years and decades. The motion before us tonight aims to acknowledge that the Council has a key role to play in enabling East Renfrewshire to address the global climate and ecological emergency. We must lead by example. Local authorities have a responsibility to lead on climate change agenda, and it is extremely important that the Council declares today that we support taking action to combat this emergency. And that's why I think it would be really important to keep the motion in its entirety. Last year, East Renfrewshire Council conducted a survey specifically themed on climate change. Amongst those local residents who responded, 86% agreed that climate change is an urgent and immediate problem. 76 indicated that they would like to do more to reduce the effects of climate change, and 96% agreed that the Council should lead by example to communities by taking action. This plan put forward will help to deliver and improve quality of life for our residents and communities, biodiversity and habitats, and will help support a sustainable economy to thrive across the authority. Quite simply, the journey to net zero will transform every aspect of our lives, including how we live, how we work, and how we travel. We want East Renfrewshire to seize the opportunity that becoming a net zero society presents. It is, however, important that policy making should happen on a firm evidence base, and that is exactly what East Renfrewshire has been hard at work completing. Since 2019, East Renfrewshire Council has been investigating what we can do to combat climate change. I'm a member of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, chaired by Councillor Stuart Miller. Since 2019, the committee has been investigating climate change, and in March last year, it passed a paper which recommended that a climate change strategy and action plan be renewed as a matter of urgency to reflect the changing priorities within the Council. And there is global consensus that climate change is the greatest challenge of our lifetime, and we recognise that the Council cannot address this challenge alone. It will take commitment from all of us, and that's again why I think it's so important to keep this motion and vote this through, because at the core of this motion is the plan to set up a climate change partnership group. This will be made up of local residents, councillors, young citizens, local businesses and community organisations. It is so important that we reach out to as many people and organisations as possible to hear about their concerns, priorities and ambitions. We want to understand how people are already changing their behaviour, what further changes they're willing to make, and what further changes we all need to make to tackle the global climate emergency here locally. At the same time, it's extremely important to be sure that we have a just transition, and that in responding to a changing climate, the journey is fair and creates a better future for everyone. As we seek to recover from COVID-19 pandemic, an unforeseeable crisis, we know that we will need to turn once more to the emergency that we did see coming. Working together, we will strive to restore a safe climate, and at the same time, we will be making East Renfrewshire a healthier and fairer council to live. To accomplish this, we will have to move very rapidly from a throwaway culture to a genuinely circular economy. The motion before us is on one of the planet's most pressing issues, and I genuinely hope tonight that we can reach a consensus and achieve cross-party support to move this policy forward. As Antonio Guterres said, we must get serious and we must act fast. I would ask you to pass this motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Ireland. Could I invite Councillor Bamford to speak to the motion if she wishes to, as the seconder?
Thank you, Provost. I'll be very brief because obviously Councillor Ireland has said a lot of what needs to be said. I'm delighted to second this motion. Whilst we've all quite rightly, as Councillor Wallace mentioned, been concentrating on dealing with the pandemic, COP26 arriving in Glasgow is now focused in everyone's minds on what's an even bigger challenge to us all worldwide. While we all have different opinions on whether tens of thousands of people should be flying into Glasgow, I'm sure we all agree that we need these world leaders to agree a strategy urgently to address the huge dangers posed to us all by climate change. The United Nations recently published its 6th report on climate change, which warned the world is heading for calamitous temperature rises above 1.5 degrees, which will cause widespread extreme weather and other changes which are likely to be irreversible. Each of the past 4 decades has been successively warmer than the last, and we are now 1 degree warmer than before the Industrial Revolution. Scientists are unanimous that human-caused greenhouse gases are causing these rapid changes. This is an incontrovertible fact. The world is already 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer than it was during its pre-industrial years, and current emissions levels suggest that the planet will warm by an estimated 4 to 5 degrees by the end of the century if we don't do anything. Such a rate of warming, the United Nations warned, would cause catastrophic disruptions to the global environment, extreme sea level rises, storms, droughts, heat waves, and more, some of which we are already witnessing worldwide. I visited Iceland in December 2019. The glacier we climbed used to be located beside the car park. Only 5 years previously, in 2014, when we visited in 2019, it was a 20-minute walk due to the melting of the glacier. It will have further receded since then. From 2000 to 2019, Iceland's glaciers lost 750 square kilometres. I saw this at first hand and heard other such facts from our guides. The United Nations Environment Programme and their emissions gap report estimated a slightly lower number of 2.7 degrees warming, but even this lower estimate would have a hugely devastating impact. Despite these predictions, many countries' plans to cut carbon still fall far short of what's needed to avert dangerous climate change by limiting global warming to a maximum of 1.5 degrees. However, there is hope that if long-term net zero goals are met, temperatures can be significantly reined in. This is where we all have a role and we can play our part. Despite having decarbonised more quickly than any other G20 country, Scotland still has a long way to go to reach the government net zero target by 2045, which is an ambitious target and 5 years earlier than the rest of the UK. But we're all in this important journey together. It won't be easy and we will learn as we go along. We can achieve this if we face up to the challenge. It will be expensive, but the cost if we don't do this will be incalculable. East Renfrewshire Council has already started in this journey. This motion acknowledges the important strides the Council has made, but we need to accelerate this journey, if not for our sakes, then for our children and our grandchildren. Sorry, this bit's repeating a bit what Councillor Ireland had said about the thematic study, where 86% of respondents, local respondents, agreed that climate change is an urgent and immediate problem, and 76% indicated they would like to do a lot more. East End Council are already working on a climate change strategy and action plan, and we have a dedicated climate officer. We need to build in this zeitgeist, which is escalating as people open their eyes to the catastrophe ahead. This is why our motion proposes setting up a climate change partnership group to involve councillors, officers, residents, young citizens, businesses and any other relevant parties. We recognise that we don't have all the answers and the views of our residents and local businesses are essential. Together we can do this. We have seen during the pandemic how much we can achieve when we work together as a community. Please support this motion so we can work together towards a better, more sustainable future for us all. The alternative is unthinkable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bamforth. Could I invite Councillor Wallace to formally move his amendment?
Thank you, Provost. For East Renfrewshire Council to declare a climate emergency in the same week that 120 or so world leaders, together with an entourage of some 10,000 dignitaries and advisors, are arriving on our very doorstep to attend the COP26 Climate Summit to discuss the measures required to address the very emergency they are declaring, it does appear a little ineffectual and somewhat, if you like, closing the stable door after the horse has well and truly bolted. We're apparently to applaud ourselves, laid claim to the Council's performance in areas such as recycling, which frankly has little to do with the Council and everything to do with its residents, who are only too well aware of the climate emergency. Are we to applaud the gross negligence in the upkeep of Eastwood Leisure Centre, for example, which is in such a state of repair that it is necessitating a £50 million replacement? And I do wonder what the carbon footprint for that is going to be. This motion requests that we emphasise the importance of our biodiversity and natural environment and encourage and support practices to enhance and sustain the farmed and natural world, whilst at the same time destroy the natural habitat of the Barrhead Dams and its surrounds for the apparently overwhelming need to straighten the road. The motion makes reference to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, of which Councillor Ireland, as she said in her delivery there, is a member. Indeed, its most recent meeting of the 23rd of September had the review of the Strategic Risk Register on its agenda. And how long did East Renfrewshire Council's Audit and Scrutiny Committee spend on the all-important mechanism in which to address the very issues this motion is referring to? 6 minutes. And were these 6 minutes spent on challenging the climate change? No. EU exit was seemingly significantly more important. Was there any direct mention given over to 6.23 of the risk register, which refers to the high workloads which, with additional work as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with business as usual, may lead to employees experiencing stress and poor well-being, and also may impact on project delivery, resulting in delayed deadlines that could damage the council's reputation. No mention whatsoever by the SNP councillors' answer to this risk. Their answer is to add to the council officers' workload in the form of the measures listed in this motion. I should add that the risk I have referred to is red, denoting high risk. The risk referred to and the impact of severe weather in the risk register is medium. Fortunately, the demands that have been made in this motion are actually largely covered. There's just about every paper, be it in the form of a proposal, a report, a policy idea, is invariably finished with the words, "There are no implications in terms of staffing, property, legal, IT, equalities, or sustainability." And I have yet to hear either councillor challenge these words. If they do not challenge, then clearly they do not see any issues. Now, I should add my surprise at members of the administration having to put forward a motion of this nature when they have all the powers at their disposal to do whatever they wish. This motion, as such, is quite unnecessary. However, as I understand it, in order to consign it to the bin marked strictly not for recycling, there needs to be a counter motion, of which the one that I read earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Wallace. Could invite Councillor Grant to speak if you wish, as part of your second amendment.
I will be brief, unlike Councillor Bamford, who said she would be brief and then went on to give us another tirade of rubbish. It was interesting, a partnership was mentioned just a minute or two ago by Councillor Bamford about us all working together. Just a little piece of information for you. On Saturday, I had a letter from the Scottish NHS giving me a hospital appointment on Friday afternoon in Greenock. Now, I don't think that Newton Mearns to Greenock is going to do an awful lot for the travel arrangements that are in place just now. Who thinks that the NHS is running on a separate stream to the rest of us? Because clearly sending somebody from Newton Mearns to Greenock for a quick hospital appointment has obviously not heard of anything to do with climate change. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope you're going with train, Councillor Grant. No.
Not a chance. There's no trains running.
Okay, I will now open the motion and the amendment for debate from other members. So if you wish to speak, put your hand up. Councillor Miller first.
Thanks very much, Provost. Can I begin by saying that I'm extremely disappointed in this motion. I know Annette phoned me to let me know that this was coming, and I thought, great, this will help highlight the topical issue, and I thanked her for her call. As Councillor Ireland has been a valuable and active member of the Council's Audit and Scrutiny Committee, and as Chair, I thank her for her contribution over the years. Therefore, she will be well aware of the amount of work done by the council staff and members of the committee, most notably Charlie Leloup when he was here, on that very serious and challenging issue, and I fully acknowledge the contribution that Councillor Ireland made at that time. I was also of the opinion that Councillor Bamforth was a member of the Council's Cabinet Committee, and as such would have been a member of the committee when the Audit Scrutiny Report was considered and accepted all 12 recommendations. She was also in attendance when the report came before the Council, where it was also considered and approved. Both councillors should be more than aware that the Environment Department are way ahead of the curve when it's benchmarked against other councils regarding recycling. Our rates has been the best in Scotland for a number of years, and we were one of the pioneering councils, along with others, to build their own recycling plants, despite what Councillor Wallace had said. These recycling rates are partly due to the Environment Department agreeing to develop the facilities, but mainly their local residents, who've been agreeing with Councillor Wallace on that one, who are very keen to recycle as much as possible. Frankly, Provost, I find this motion to be a slap in the face to all those East End residents who religiously recycle, and I find it deeply disturbing when it comes from two local councillors who really should know better. The motion is also an effectively a kick in the teeth to staff in the Environment Department, who are doing as much as they can, given the resources this administration gives them. So the administration is going to give the department more resources in the coming year to, quote, accelerate its plan to reduce carbon emissions, unquote, because these things are not free, they have a cost. If that's going to be the case, then I'd be absolutely delighted to support extra resources going to the department. But we're all aware that to do that, Holyrood needs to be properly funded councils. Sturgeon herself said just on Monday, what was needed was credible actions, not face-saving slogans. The First Minister and their government are well aware of today's budget, where due to the Barnett formula, Scotland will get an extra 4.6 billion. And I'm forever hopeful that some of this Westminster money will trickle down to Scottish councils, which have been underfunded for the past 7 years. And even if some of this money were to come to councils and was ring-fenced for environmental projects, that would be great. And it would also help to make this motion more relevant. We council have all been invited to plant trees, or a tree or trees. The council have already committed to planting a tree to represent every resident in their area, which is recommended by the Audit Scrutiny Committee. That's, excuse me, that's in the region of 92,000 trees. And if everyone in our area just planted one more, that'd be almost 200,000 trees. If by chance the young folk of today look back, will they remember that this council passed this motion in the hope that something might be happening? Or will they look forward and see nearly 200,000 extra trees planted by the council area, which would be a much more positive step than talking about it? Colleagues, both councillors are members of the council administration and members of the budget strategy group. Therefore, both could have taken action either last year or, given that the budget strategy group has already met this year in preparation for next year's budget, could they not have insisted that this be included in next year's budget? Therefore, there is absolutely no need for this motion. Provost, given that the Cabinet and the Council have already accepted the Audit Scrutiny Committee report, this motion is merely political posturing and is totally irrelevant, because I would contend that our council are doing everything they can with the resources made available to them at present. It's really disappointing that the two councillors are using such a serious issue as climate change for their own narrow-minded political purposes. As chair of the Audit Scrutiny Committee, I have strived to keep it non-political, so it's really disappointing that one political group are trying to use this serious global issue for their own ends. As our wonderful Queen of the United Kingdom has said, we need less talking and more doing. Colleagues, I'm sorry, but I, for one, am not going to vote for this motion either way, either for the motion or the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. Can I call in Councillor MacDonald? Could I just at this point ask councillors not to exceed the 5 minutes, please? You're very close to that mark, Councillor Miller. But Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Provost. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We rather borrow it from our children. It's an Amish thing, perhaps, Ralph Waldo Emerson, maybe a Native American proverb. Nobody really needs to, or nobody really knows where the quotation came from. Oscar Wilde, in his 1936 book, Oscar Wilde Discovers America, by Lloyd Lewis and Henry Justin Smith. The remark appeared in a section of the book discussing Wilde's visit to Canada in 1882. The things of nature do not really belong to us, he said. We should leave them to our children as we have received them. Now, we can all have the arguments about climate change and whether it exists or whether it doesn't exist. Believe it or not, there are still people on this planet that actually believe that it doesn't exist. I find that to be quite a remarkable thing. Nevertheless, we are where we are with it, and we need tangible change going forward. It is the existential crisis of our time, and it encompasses everything else. Before we can talk about things about pandemics or our economies, we have to have an environment before everything else. Factory farming intensifies climate change. It releases a vast volumes of greenhouse gases. We know that man-made climate change is real, and it poses a great threat to the planet and its inhabitants. Current data suggests that we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in developed countries by at least 80% by 2050 in order to have a chance of staying below an average temperature rise of 2 degrees. Factory farming is a major contributor to the climate change challenge, releasing vast volumes of greenhouse gases. Factory farming also produces greenhouse gases throughout the supply chain. For example, forest clearance to grow the crops and rear the animals reduces vital carbon sinks and releases gases previously stored in the soil and vegetation. So it's little surprise that our resident farmer within the council is so vehemently against this motion, but that's by the by, and it's not to be unexpected. Everybody has an axe to grind. I don't want this to be a political issue, because as Annette says, it should not be a political issue. It's about our human civilization being able to exist going forward. I have 2 young girls, age 10 and age 7, and I want to see them live out a normal lifespan. I want to see their children and their children live out normal lifespans. You know, there's a lot of selfishness going on right now with how we deal with the climate crisis, and very often people don't want to act until the water has literally come across their threshold. And I think that's happening, and we need to have serious conversations about how we go forward and how we beat it, because for far too long there's been too much jargon, too much lip service, and not enough action. So on that basis, hearing what Annette has said tonight, I'm happy to support her motion going forward. I think it is something that the council should have official in terms of a statement going forward and represent the council to the Scottish Government and make our position clear as a council. I think it's very, very important. So happy to support.
Okay, thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Can I call in Councillor Merrick, please?
Thank you, Provost. I hope that I will be the briefest of anybody here tonight. I'm supporting the motion. Very disappointing listening to some of the rhetoric from the Conservative and Unionist Party there. Today, I saw a little bit of the budget and I wondered whether anybody had a fiddle to give your leaders in London so they could play them while the planet burns. This was an extremely serious point. Half the damage has been done in the last 30 years. Now we know all the bad news. We've got to hit that 50% in the next this decade. We've got to get these emissions down to half of the net zero. Of course, net zero doesn't mean removing all emissions. It means doing other things that take some of this dirt out of the atmosphere. However, what we hear are the doom and gloom stories. But while we speak right now, there still is hope, and everything we can do to empower people and give them the information to make the right choices will help. We all share about 8 tons of carbon per head. I think it's 8, it might be more. But there are simple and straightforward ways to get through that. And our council has come a long way. Recycling is one of the ways. But our general wasteful society, we throw out half as much food as we eat, for example. So people shouldn't feel too disheartened. It is still within our control Now, I hope I'm still well within the time, because I'm going to take it a little bit further. It's within our control for the next 10 to 11 years. We need to get to 50% cut. And then by 2050, I think it's the whole lot. I'm not sure about, it's somewhere about that. David McDonald said a bit smaller, or not quite as small as that, but these are the little debates around the edges. So there are ways and there are things that we can do. And really, that's what we have to be exploring and moving forward on that basis. So I will support the motion. And this is not one for playing political games with, guys. It really isn't. I guess everybody in the room here probably hopes to die of old age. Let's hope our children or our grandchildren get that same opportunity. And if we don't make the right decisions now and take this seriously and stop playing with it, then, and not just us, but spread that message across. And we're in leadership positions. That's what we should be doing. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Merrick. I'm calling on anybody that hasn't spoken before with their hand up. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'm quite surprised, perhaps even astonished at some of the discussion that's went on this evening. The vast majority, obviously, I would have expected we would all agree with, in terms of we recognise that global warming is a very significant issue of our age and that we need to tackle it in as many ways as we possibly can. If I just state one question from the motion, or one sentence, sorry. The motion reaffirms the Council's commitment to these actions and to protecting our environment, and is seeking to accelerate its plans to reduce carbon emissions to zero as soon as practicable, and lists some of the things that we can do. It also lists some of the fantastic work that has also already taken place across our authority. It highlights, and if we actually looked at Councillor Wallace's amendment, if he was adding that in as an additional point to the motion, we would all probably agree with it, because there has been a huge amount of work done. Staff have done a fantastic job in both dealing with the pandemic and indeed still taking forward many of the issues that will hopefully in future lead to a reduction in carbon emissions. So I find it quite astonishing that some of the remarks that were then made were frankly unsupportive of the position that we already have, of the work already done, and that's very disappointing. Colleagues, I would therefore, without going on, I think we've discussed it all, support the motion. I don't think it's not been put in as being political. It is there to highlight a very real issue which impacts on us all.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Can I remind councillors you can only speak once in the debate? Is there anybody who hasn't spoken wishing to speak before I call Councillor Ireland in to sum up? I don't see any hands from anybody who hasn't spoken already. So could I invite Councillor Ireland to sum up for the motion and remind you that you have 5 minutes maximum. Thank you.
Oh God.
Thank you very much, Provost, and thank you very much to everyone that's spoken in support of the motion. I'm genuinely probably a little bit upset at what I've heard. I was at pains to say twice that I was hoping that we could reach cross-party support, because this was something that is just so important to all of us. I was trying to make it as non-political as possible, because again, this affects us all. I wanted to go back to the motion. I mean, there's a few things in here that I would not want to see that we lose if we lose the motion. The fact that we are talking about the setting up that climate change group and actually getting together with councillors and officers and local residents and community groups, it's an opportunity not to be missed to set this up. What I would say though is, I mean, I do hear some of the points that were made, and it's important to state that all members every single person here today will have an opportunity to feed into this plan as it's put forward in the motion. Indeed, Audit and Scrutiny had previously put forward suggestion of a member officer working group, and there'll be ample opportunity to feed into that, as well as feeding in to the group with local residents. And I can't stress that enough. I want to approach people. I want to hear what they want to do in East Renfrewshire. And in answer to Stuart's comments as well, I would say that the motion here is to accelerate plans that have been put forward. I'm not belittling those previous plans that have been made. It's just to accelerate those plans and add in some measures that will do that, while including everyone that lives here if they so wish. It was important in that when we had the survey and the numbers were so huge that people were feeding back to us how important it was that we took a lead on it and how they wanted to see change. I want to see that, and I want to see it in partnership with the community. As I said, I'm so extremely disappointed with everything that I've heard. I've been accused of political posturing and using this for my, our own ends. That's not why this is brought at all. Any declaration of a climate emergency, it cannot be made just as a hollow gesture. It must be backed up by action and evidence, and it's essential that targets are put in place and plans developed to reach it. This plan, the motion before us today, will help us do that. So again, I would just ask you to please pass the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ireland. I know there are some other hands up, but I have to follow standing orders, and that's the end of the debate. So we now move to the vote, which, because we're all online, has to be a roll call vote. So could I ask Mr. Daly just to organise the vote?
Thank you, Provost. The motion in front of the members this evening is as is printed on the agenda, proposed by Councillor Bamford, Councillor Ireland, and seconded by Councillor Bamford. The amendment is the amendment from Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Grant, that we read out at the start of the debate. What I'll do is I'll go through the elected members in alphabetical order, and I'll ask them to indicate if they're voting for the motion, the amendment, or if they are going to abstain. So I'll start with Councillor Bamford.
Sorry, point of order.
Yeah, Councillor MacDonald.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, is it not normal procedure that Councillor Ireland finished off with summing up and she was given an opportunity to sum up? Is it not normal procedure to allow also the person who put forward the amendment to have a sum up at the end?
No.
It's not, Councillor MacDonald. If you check standing orders, you'll see that that provision applies only to the person who moved the motion.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if I move to the vote, first of all, Councillor Bamford.
Motion.
Councillor Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Provost Fletcher.
Motion.
Councillor Gilbert.
Don't know.
I think you may be on mute, Councillor Gilbert.
I support the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grant.
I support the amendment.
Councillor Ireland.
Motion.
Councillor Lafferty. You're on mute, Councillor Lafferty.
He's probably given up under the circumstances.
I can see Councillor Lafferty's showing up as being on mute.
No.
Oh. You want to try and unmute Councillor Lafferty? I'll come back to you at the end. Councillor MacDonald.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Merrick.
Motion.
Councillor Miller.
As indicated, I abstain.
Councillor Wallace.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Lafferty, are you able to unmute? I'm afraid I don't even see a picture of Councillor Lafferty on screen where you could indicate for or against or abstention.
That's a bonus.
I don't know if anyone else can see Councillor Lafferty.
No.
I'm here as well, albeit I came in a bit later.
Right, apologies, Councillor Convery. We didn't appreciate that you'd actually joined the meeting. We know that you weren't here at the start.
Lovell, right.
Are you motion amendment or abstaining?
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Lafferty, can you hear us or can you indicate?
He's given up.
Eamon, he's putting his thumbs up and saying motion, I think, because I can see
That's
him.
thank you, Julie. Thank you. I don't have him on screen, unfortunately, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
On that basis, the vote is 8 for the motion, 3 for the amendment, with 1 abstention. So the motion is carried.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Daly. Thank you very much for everybody's contributions. Sorry about the technical hitches that some people have found. Joys of working online, I suppose. Can we move to item number 6, which is the statements from conveners, representatives and joint boards or committees. There are 2 statements tonight from Councillor Bamforth and Councillor Merrick. Can invite Councillor Bamforth to go first. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. My statement's probably less than the 3 minutes that my statement was earlier. Anyway, thank you.
Longer, I have to tell you.
At the September IJB meeting, the HSCP's 5th annual performance report was presented. A retrospective report setting out how the HSCP has delivered on its vision and commitments while recognising the challenges and impacts of the pandemic. The Clinical and Care Governance Annual Report also highlighted key areas of work over 2021, such as the collaboration with local care homes, establishment of new testing regimes and regular meetings to support care homes. The HSCP also took on responsibility for additional flu cohorts and the COVID vaccination programme in care homes, whilst continuing to provide health and social care services. The HSCP has seen an increase in demand for services during this time, with increased poverty, health inequalities and poorer mental health, frailty and deconditioning as a result of the pandemic. There was a frank discussion about the challenging times staff have faced and the impact on their well-being, with staff becoming more and more fatigued. The IJB commended their dedication and resilience and noted the importance of being compassionate and understanding in all our interactions. Children and families colleagues provided an overview of emotional and mental wellbeing services for children, and in particular the Healthier Minds Hub, which was established during the pandemic to respond to the rapidly emerging demands. It was also good to see that data from the Family Wellbeing Service shows a significant reduction in repeat presentations at GPs. The report demonstrated strong partnership working, and it's great to hear that it's continued during the pandemic with more development planned. Our Care at Home service was very pleased to receive grades of 4, which is good, following its last inspection, and this is reflective of the significant investment and dedication of the team. It's also great to hear all improvements were sustained across the pandemic. The service does, however, continue to experience significant pressures as a result of increased demand and staffing issues. Recruitment remains ongoing and intermediate care pathways have been strengthened in order to alleviate the pressures. It was a full agenda, and we also had an update on the HSCP Recovery and Resources Programme, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde Unscheduled Care Programme, Community Change Fund and the Revenue Monitoring Budget. The IJB also agreed to remit the 2023 charges for services to Cabinet in November. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bamford. And I now call in Councillor Merrick for his statement.
Thank you, Provost. Wanted to talk a wee bit about East Renfrewshire Culture and Leisure recovery. So on sports and physical activity, as is the normal practice, Culture and Leisure delivered activity camps in the October week school holidays. Camps were in Eastwood High and Barhead High School and ran from 9 AM to 3 PM Monday to Friday for 5-year-olds to 14-year-olds. Camp in Eastwood High was a multi-sports camp, and the camp in Barhead High was a multi-activity camp featuring dance, drama and sports. We provided healthy lunches at each camp via our school catering partners. There was a lot of activity delivered in the summer school holidays under the National Get Into Summer scheme, which funded 40 places at each camp for vulnerable children and young people. The vulnerable children and young people who were referred onto the camps came through a partnership with social work services. Social workers attended the camps as they had in summer, and this provided them with an opportunity to engage more fully with these young people in a safe and informal environment. Strong partnership between East Renfrewshire Culture and Leisure, our education department and the Hscp has been one of the positive outcomes of the last year and our response to the difficult circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. On library and information services, as well as book bug sessions resuming, September saw our first public sessions for older children on Roald Dahl Day, which was September the 12th. This was followed by National Libraries Week at the beginning of October. And this year's theme, which is appropriate given the role libraries have played during the last year, was Taking Action, Changing Lives. Libraries delivered interactive storytelling and craft sessions for pre-5 children, bringing the stories to life. Finally, last week, Busby Library reopened following its refurbishment, meaning all of East Renfrewshire's libraries are now open once more. On Eastwood Theatre, tickets for our Christmas pantomime, Peter Pan, are now on sale. And this is our biggest and most ambitious production yet. So I'm very pleased to report that over 1/3 of tickets have already been sold. So I can let everybody know that you should please book early to avoid disappointment. And finally, on community lets for children and young people, I'm delighted to say that the Council and Trust have developed an approach which will allow community lets for children and young people to restart. They're looking to put these arrangements in place as soon as possible and will be contacting clubs later this week. This new approach will be monitored carefully between now and Christmas. And if the measures put in place are effective in the safe running of school lets, they will look to extend it to all other bookings in January 2022. That ends the statement. Thank you very much, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Merrick, for that. Can I move on? Item number 7, Provost engagements, which is just for noting. Okay, and item number 8, which is the Chief Social Work Officer's annual report. I know your hand up, Councillor Lafferty. Do you want to say something before we move on to the next item? No?
Can't hear you.
I'm back with us anyway, but I can't hear you. Okay.
You're on mute, Councillor Lafferty.
Well, can you hear me now?
Can hear you
Yes.
now.
Yeah, just to let you know. Thanks, Provost.
Okay, your hand's up, Alan. Take your hand down. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, which is the Chief Social Work Officer's annual report. This report is submitted to the Scottish Government. I know Ms Rocks wishes to speak to it, but I think Councillor Bamford, you wanted to say a few words as well, so I'll call you in first, and then on to Kate Rocks after.
No, I think it was yourself, Councillor Provost, that was asked to speak.
Oh, sorry, right, okay, that's fine. That was just an email I had earlier. I thought it was yourself who wanted to do. It's only an introduction to Kate Rocks, so I'm not going to say anything specifically about the report. Just to welcome Ms Rocks to the Council and ask her to speak to the report and we will obviously open it up for any questions afterwards. So, Kate, if you want to speak to the report, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. This report reflects the professional activity for social work and social care for within East Renfrewshire for over 2021. I think what's of significance for us that this report is providing the testimony and how the social work and social care workforce responded to the emerging risks within the pandemic. And I would hope that the members recognise the richness in this report. It is unprecedented, the level of demand and complexity that social work has and social care has had to manage, and the impact that that's had on both our residents and our staff. But nevertheless, despite all of this, there has been key successes in what we've had achieved. We have learned lots, and in many respects it's brought us closer together within our partnerships. You know, both Councillor Merrick outlined the emerging strength in the partnership between leisure services, and I would want to comment about our partnerships with education. We wouldn't have been able to deliver this without our partners in education, particularly in children's services, where we were asked to report to Scottish Government on a fortnightly basis how we responded to the pandemic for our most vulnerable children. I mean, we were one of the most successful partnerships and recognised nationally for our ability to kind of quickly mobilise and ensure that we were keeping our children and our families safe. And I think we've done a really, really good job of that. We also see that we had to quickly move to a digital landscape, and that was quite difficult and challenge for us because we know that there has been issues across the board around digital poverty, but again, the partnerships within the council and much wider ensured that we were able to respond and target our most vulnerable families to ensure that we were engaging with our looked after children. Our social workers were exceptional. Our looked after children, though they themselves sometimes were very isolated in their own tenancies because of lockdown, didn't, you know, sometimes on a Friday open the door to find a pizza there or a Chinese there. The birthdays were missed. Our children with disabilities who, in many respects, were greatly impacted by the pandemic. Our inclusive support services went out and dropped baskets, play equipment, and all the doors. I mean, our staff went way beyond, as well as having to carry out our statutory duties. For adult services, we've seen a significant improvement in our response to harm. You know, we were very worried last year about our ability to kind of respond and ensure that we provide safety to our most vulnerable. We've seen significant improvement, stronger partnership working. Last night, I'm pleased to say that the Working Together Award at the Scottish Association of Social Workers award was given to East Renfrewshire Hscp for their partnership, the large-scale investigation team, and one of our adult social workers received Social Worker of the Year. But I need to say that what we're seeing is a level of harm that has came out of the pandemic that isn't about transmission anymore, is again significant. How has it affected our older people? I mean, Councillor Bamford has already outlined that in terms of our response to recovery. Our mental health for our young people have improved, have increased, despite our efforts to kind of provide a whole systems approach. And if we hadn't provided that, we'd be running with unprecedented levels of risk.
I'm seeing their child protection registration increasing in a way that it is never done, and we are accommodating more looked after children, because from the pandemic, harm has been hidden and is now coming out, and that is replicated with some of our partners' experiences across the board. I just would want to say that the same could be said and is said for adult services. So this is across the board, and this is a really challenging time for social work and social care workforce. And I say it every year, but I'm completely humbled by them. You know, I mean, they stepped up, they were compassionate and kind, they didn't think about themselves, they put others first, they lived all the values of East Renfrewshire Council every day throughout the pandemic. So I don't want to say any more because in many respects we've had testimony already from Councillor Merrick and Councillor Bamford around that, and I would just invite anyone to make a comment or to ask any questions around the content of the report. So thank you, Provost, for inviting me to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. A contribution there. Can I now open it up for any comments or questions? Councillor Buchanan.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, thank you, Kate, for an excellent report. We all know the difficulties that particularly the service which you lead has had over the last 18 months. It was a service that's already under pressure with a huge workload, and that increased significantly as we went into lockdown, and indeed continues to increase as we now come out of lockdown for a huge variety of reasons. I think there's one part in the paper that actually highlights it all in point 13, which states that at the heart of the social work profession lies a commitment to enabling and supporting vulnerable individuals to make positive, sustainable changes to their lives to achieve the best outcomes for them, families and communities as a whole. And I think never has a statement been truer. The work that the department has done has been outstanding. It's always been good and we've always delivered, but to do it under the pressures of the last 18 months has really been quite phenomenal. And to work with not only the variety of partners that you have, but the number of volunteers, and to ensure that we sent support out to as many families and vulnerable people as we possibly could is testament to the great work that is delivered by our social care department and by our social workers. It has been highlighted by other members. It's been highlighted regularly in our IJB and across our Hscp. So once again, thanks to everyone involved. And I think the report speaks for itself in many ways, but I think in many instances, people may not realise just how much additional work has been looked at and has been taken on board in recent months. And I think that's testament to the profession and the work that you all do. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Cannon.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Buchanan. Just looking for hands that have come up. Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that and thank Kate and her team and all the Hscp staff as well. I was involved with today with the Local Excellence Awards, looking at all the different people who were nominated in various categories, and even I was blown away by some of the work that's been done. I mean, obviously the paper speaks for itself, but when you actually go into the minutiae that we read today about how the staff have stepped up during this pandemic, going over it and above, and even all the things that you've moved on with apace, things like the healthier minds and all that, you know, because of obviously we all know the issues that young people and lots of people are having with their mental well-being over the pandemic. So yes, thank you so much, and I applaud all the Hscp staff because I think they've all done a marvellous job, and we should all really appreciate just what goes on behind the scenes that we just don't see.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bamford. Councillor Wallace, did you want to come in? See your hand up occasionally and then it goes down. I don't know if it's my screen.
Yeah, no, my hand was getting tired. No, just to really just to acknowledge this very excellent report and the tremendous work that the department is doing under very challenging and difficult circumstances. And I think if nothing else, this underlines what we're going to be bringing up as far as the National Care Service is concerned later on. So congratulations to, I don't know if that's the correct word, but just our thanks to Ms. Rocks and her team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Provost, and thanks to Ms. Rocks for bringing this report and speaking with us today. I mean, obviously, we're going through a mental health crisis in this country, in Scotland and throughout the United Kingdom. It's been exacerbated tenfold by COVID, which has really poured fuel on the fire. It's a very serious problem, and one of the problems that I seem to, or many people acknowledge, is the fact that mental health is not taken as seriously as physical health in this country, and that needs to change. There needs to be a 50-50 balance on how we attack mental health problems in this country. My question to Ms. Rocks would be, if you were to name one thing that would make your job or your department be able to carry out its duties more effectively, what would that be?
More partnership, more whole system working, Councillor MacDonald, and actually identifying our shared priorities across the partnership and coming together to set aside silo budgets setting, and that we do that as a collective around what our key priorities are. And I actually think Councillor Bamford highlighted our Healthier Minds approach. That was a bit of a small test of change for us, because that money didn't come from the council, it came from Scottish Government. And yet, as a collective of partners, and Siobhan's on the call too from education, we came together, set aside, you know, what our own ambitions were for our services, and put the child and the family at the heart. And that's what's made the difference. It's not stopped the epidemic of our mental health. And it is an epidemic, and that's what's come out of the pandemic. I mean, I think that more recently, 1 in 6 children in England, I don't have the stats for Scotland, have been affected by mental health coming out of this. We are seeing unparamounted levels of demand that's coming across the system, but that system is responding really well. And instead of going in, it doesn't meet that referral criteria for us. We are coming together to do and see what we can do best to support that child and that family, knowing that the impact, without that support, things will just get worse. It isn't always about clinical interventions either for mental health. We find that the vast majority of children we are managing as partners and professionals with high levels of complexity, but not necessarily we recognise that the CAM systems is the best place for it. So it's a combination of more investment into these services. It's a combination of get a strong partnership working that doesn't see budgets within silos. I hope that answers your question. It's 3 things probably. I wanted to have been really greedy tonight.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you've answered the question in many different ways. What I would say is, from my own standpoint, is I think that the politicians at the higher level, both at Holyrood and in Westminster, need to actually start. The rhetoric needs to change and the dialogue needs to change, because until we have that political will coming from these large bodies of government filtering through to our local government, in terms of their financial commitment to increasing budgets for treatment for mental health, it makes the job exceptionally difficult. So I commend you for leading a department in very, very, very tough times, and thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. I don't see any other hands up, so can I thank Ms. Rocks for her contribution, and again echo all the comments that have been made about and agree to submit the report to Scottish Government. Can we move on to item number 9 now, which is the National Care Service and the proposed response to the consultation? I know a number of the members of the seminars and the leaders have an involvement, but before I do open it up for any comments or questions, could I invite Jamie Reid just to make a couple of points?
Thank you, Provost. There's a couple of updates to the paper that are quite small, but I think quite important to reflect the feedback that we had from the different political leaders who have been involved in helping us develop this. I would just draw your attention to page 69 under the section that's the summary position. There's a reference to the levelling up and levelling down. That's now been replaced just to highlight that there's a risk that the national approach may weaken some of the collaborative and partnership working that's been successfully put in place that you've just actually heard about locally. There is also another change on page 70 that we've made just to caution against the risk of over-medicalising our social care services and retaining the kind of community aspect and the professional cultures that come from our social care services. And finally, just on page 75, under the staffing section, there is a short paragraph has also been now been added in the final version. It's not in your papers, just to capture the broad and multifaceted nature of the chief social worker role. So those 3 changes had actually been made, but they just haven't been reflected in the papers in front of you this evening.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Reid, for that. Can I just open it up now for any questions or comments on the report? Councillor Miller.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you, Provost. Can I thank Jamie and his team for this report, which, as far as I can see, reflects all that was said at the earlier meeting. Can also thank the 3 councillors who met to compile this report. But the question has to be, since this was a manifesto commitment by the Nats, are they not duty bound to carry this through and, assisted by their odious green poodles, force their nationalisation plans for social work, just like they did with Police Scotland education up to a point? Or can the Nats renege on their manifesto commitment?
Okay, I think that's a rhetorical question there. Councillor Buchanan, do you want to comment on the report?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'm not sure where Stuart's comments come from. There is a consultation ongoing, and that's what we're responding to. The outcome of that consultation, there may well be a national care service, but what it actually does and how the services are delivered within that is the key aspect. And perhaps maybe should also note that from a Westminster point of view, or within England, there is also a review of social care services ongoing, looking at a national care service and how it might well deliver for individuals. What we did agree here is members will be well aware of the fact that there is a consultation. The proposals will have a significant impact on local government, local democratic accountability, and our staff and service users. And this response is measured in its response to that part of the consultation. Members agreed that our approach should, on the 8th of September, an all-member briefing session was held with officers on the 23rd of September. And on the 18th of October, our cross-party working group met to discuss the draft response being brought before members this evening. You have that response in front of you. Jamie has highlighted the areas that will be amended slightly to ensure that all the thoughts that were presented from respective councillors are taken on board. I think your response does highlight all of the discussion that we had. I think it takes on board the main comments that were made and our thoughts on it. And so the report before you, I think, captures that cross-party consensus while also incorporating the professional and technical responses from our lead officers. Once we agree the report this evening, the response will be officially submitted prior to obviously the national deadline or the consultation deadline. Quite clearly, I think the message in it, and there are the three key points that we take from it, is that local accountability is vital. And I'm sure, and I think that came across very clearly in all of the discussions that we have had on a national care service. There may well be aspects which could sit at a national level, but it's quite clear that as a local authority, that local members, and indeed arguing the case in terms of local outcomes, is the best way forward for the service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. I don't see any other hands up. Yep, Councillor Wallace.
You're on mute.
Councillor Wallace.
I was so determined to get through the meeting without these words being spoken, but there we are. You're on mute, Councillor Wallace. Okay. Yeah, I think just to say that the meeting which Councillor Buchanan, Councillor Lafferty and myself got together to discuss this report, it was very amenable. I think we pretty much agreed on really the bulk of what was in that report. It's a very refreshing meeting, should I say. The only reservations I have, only concerns I have, is that you may recall at the last meeting that every one of the SNP councillors didn't wish to comment on at the last meeting and wanted to reserve judgment until they saw this response that we had. I simply read into that, we'll wait until we're told how to respond. And the concern here is that it's quite clear we are in the lead up to council elections next year. And for the SNP to take an approach in which all our care services should be centralised would be pretty much work against them, I would think. My concern here is that we will not hear the results of this consultation until after these elections. We will not find out until after the elections that the care services will be centralised, despite all the reservations we have locally. I hope that is not the case. It is just a question mark I have over the process, but I do hope that once we do get beyond the next elections, next local elections, that the result of this will be very much that those councillors who are elected will be overseeing a continuation of these services being delivered locally. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. We didn't, well, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I didn't respond because there was nothing to respond to at the time when there was a paper. We now have a response in front of us that we can respond to. So I hope that answers Councillor Wallace's comment. I wanted to welcome the paper before us today. I think it was important that it states that it's critical to recognise the importance of the role of local choice, local governance and accountability, and local discretion in a democratic society. And it continues that moving legal accountabilities and decision making away from local communities would be premature and ultimately damaging. The need for local integration, local knowledge and relationships all point to the retention of these services within local authority control. Now, in principle, I do think that there's a case to be made for a national care service, especially in relation to national standards of pay and conditions, because social care workers historically have suffered very poor levels of pay and conditions. A national care service might be a mechanism to address this issue. I'm not opposed to the idea in principle on that, but I do support what the officers have said here in this report, and that in their comments, and that they agree that the National Care Service governmental structure, as is currently proposed in the consultation, and that they believe that the standards of care parameters should be set nationally, but feel that services should be delivered at a local level because local authorities know their areas, needs and requirements best. The report before us, I think, gives a true reflection of what the council and the officers are feeling and wanting to put forward. I believe this may reflect COSLA's view as well. Councillor Buchanan probably would be best to speak on that to correct me if I'm wrong, but the consultation is far wider in range than the Keeley report that came before it. It should be noted that the Scottish Government plans are not yet in a final form, and with this in mind, I sincerely hope they take our comments on board. It's a consultation, and I'm sure that the Council will keep working with the Scottish Government on aspects which will benefit local residents, our local residents of the service, and I welcome further information on this as it progresses and we get information back. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ireland. Can I call in Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, just echoing Annette's statements there. Happy to support it remaining in a local capacity in terms of how it's implemented. But in terms of the standards that are expected, I don't have a problem per se in supporting a national care service, but I think we already have this in the NHS. You know, there's a standardised system that we have in Scotland in the NHS. Everybody expects the same degrees of service to a certain extent if you're living in Aberdeen or in Dumfries, but it's implemented at a local trust level. So certainly happy to support a national care service, but it has to be implemented on the needs for the local area.
Okay, very much. I don't see any other hands up, so can we accept that the response is drafted can be forwarded to Scottish Government as per our response to the consultation?
Provost, sorry to interrupt. If I could just highlight as well, also subject to the suggested changes as proposed by Mr. Reid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to item number 10, which is a local development plan 2. The report is looking for council approval to accept the reporter's recommendation to the LDP2 as per Appendix B and to approve the LDP2 and accompanying strategic environmental assessment as per Appendices C and D. So again, it's opened up for any questions or comments that any of the councillors may have. Councillor Ireland. No,
no, sorry, Provost, I might come in, but I was just, I think Councillor Grant.
Right, Councillor MacDonald.
No, me.
Right,
Jim.
okay.
Councillor Grant, Provost.
Councillor Grant, right. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I think probably the most interesting bit on this report, which I was pleased to see, was on page 80, item 11, where it says the reporters have agreed with the plan's development strategy and have not identified any new housing sites. Well, that must be great news, because we have struggled many, many times with this business of the reporter telling us, you have to do this, you have to do the next thing. So this is good news. I'm sure Mrs. McCartney will be quite pleased that she's not having to kowtow to this bunch again. It's a very good report. I think it's a very positive one for us, because it looks like for a change, we're in charge of our own destiny. Many a time we've had to put up with a whole lot of nonsense coming from reporters. This time it looks like they've actually got a grip of the situation, and hopefully, Gillian, you'll be able to move forward for a 10-year report. We'll give you time to draw breath before the next one's due to be on the stocks. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
Councillor Grant. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, Provost, I did kind of hesitate as to whether to respond or make comment on this paper, as to do so in a sense is agreeing that reporters should have a say in what we plan locally. However, I will just pass comment on. I do notice that they're in agreement with the retention of the master plan approach, including a remediation strategy at Braidbar Quarry, Giffnick, policy M4, cognizant of the requirement for appropriate solutions to meet education needs and address other constraints. It's just the term appropriate solutions. Well, one man's appropriate is maybe different from another one's. We do wait to see, as in all things, we have to wait and see what proposed plans will be. We do recognise that there is a risk. There is an ever-present risk of collapse at Great Bar Quarry. But it's just to say that obviously as councillors we will deal with these matters as and when they come up in front of the planning committee or in front of full council. Just wanted to pass that comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Provost. I just wanted it noted. I find the whole reporter system to be not fit for purpose, to be honest with you. It's undemocratic. We had a recent decision made by planning committee at East Renfrewshire in which a unanimous decision was reached to refuse an application for an after-school facility in Ward 4. And, you know, the decision went to the reporter, and through one person's site visit, it took place for an hour, probably at a time where the traffic wasn't impacting the problem that was raised at the committee. They went back and made a decision to overturn a democratically a decision that came at committee democratically. So I just want it noted that I think the whole reporter system needs to be overhauled. I don't think it's right that, you know, people that are elected to represent people in the community are basically overturned by one single individual. I don't think it's right, and also an individual that's not elected.
Okay, thank you. Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I think it's just to highlight that this is actually a really good news story, because it's probably quite rare, I would suspect, that a local authority submits a local development plan and gets it back without any major amendments to it. And I think that's a credit to Gillian and to our planning team for all of the work that went in to delivering our local development plan. And it is significant. I think there were 36 proposals from from developers looking to either free up other areas of land or amend aspects of our report. And effectively, they were all rejected. And the majority of the issues, the reporters have agreed with the approach taken by the council in preparing the proposed LDP2. And overall, the reporters have made only minor modifications to the plan, involving mainly changes to the text, graphics and policies to assist with clarity and understanding. This can be attributed, I think, again, to the robust evidence and the justification that was prepared to support the proposed LDP2 and the council's case at examination. Again, they're probably statements that we don't see very often, local authorities being able to make in connection with the planning system. The reporters have agreed with the plan's development strategy of consolidation and regeneration and have not identified any new housing sites. And importantly, the reporters also accepted the council's approach to meeting education needs. So again, the number of positives in this report are quite significant. We have asked, obviously, this evening to approve the full proposed modifications as per the examination report and to submit the plan to Scottish ministers 28 days after the plan has been submitted to Scottish ministers. The council can adopt the plan unless directed by ministers not to do so. Any legal challenge to the adoption of the plan must be made within 6 weeks of this adoption date. Adoption of the LDP2 will provide our council with an up-to-date and refreshed LDP2 to guide the future sustainable growth of East Renfrewshire up to 2031 and beyond, and provide the appropriate basis for determining future planning applications. Following adoption of the LDP2, the preparatory work for LDP3 will start under the requirements of the Planning Scotland Act 2019, and that will commence. So again, I think a fantastic outcome for our local development plan, and thanks again to the officers involved for putting forward such a comprehensive plan with the support, obviously, of the council to ensure that we can take things forward in the manner that we want to see as a planning authority, rather than someone else, or rather at the hands of developers. So thanks very much, everyone involved.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. I don't have much to add to what Councillor Buchanan has just said. I think what I wanted to say was a huge thank you to Gillian and her team. I think for the amount of work that is going into getting the LDP to this point. I think they deserve a huge thanks for that. And also I wanted to say that I agreed with Councillor MacDonald when he was saying about the change. We should look at the reporters and the system at the moment, because I remember all too well as well the application that you're talking about. I am happy, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Councillor MacDonald, that the new lines that are proposed for Newford Grove will be welcome, and hopefully that will help with some of the parking issues that I think we were very fearful of in that area. But yes, no, totally agree with that. But yeah, huge thanks to the whole planning team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thanks once again, Provost. I also can reiterate what Councillors Ireland and MacDonald said about that particular planning application, but there also is one in East Kilbride Road, which I'm sure that Councillor Ireland will remember as well, that was just nonsense when one particular reporter came to see it on a wet day and didn't really see it properly as we did, because Councillor Convery was there as well, and we seen it twice, both from the planning application and the LRB. But can I congratulate the planning department on the production of the LDP2 and getting it through the reporter's examination with very few modifications. If the 31 alternative housing proposals had been accepted, our area would have been a lot less green than it is now, and these damn farmers would have got more money. What a pity. But my question is, PAC members and planning officers alike will remember our discussions in Root Glen Pavilion about 2 years ago. I am aware that it was about Council's own planning policy rather than LDP2. Officers were called, PAC members were unanimous in their views and were told these views would take into account the policy amendment. Can I ask, I don't know whether Gillian or Andy can give an answer as to when some of these the views will be brought forward in council policy?
I can respond to that, Councillor Miller. Obviously, during the pandemic, kind of non-essential work was stopped to a certain extent, but I'm very happy to say that we have a final draft and we will be making contact with members very soon.
Thanks, Gillian, I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. I think there's a kind of general consensus that this is a very good news story. So I echo the thanks to everybody involved. And can we accept that and move on?
Yeah.
So moving on to item number 11, which is the annual statement on adequacy and effectiveness of government's risk management and internal control systems. Could I invite Councillor Miller to speak to this, please?
Thank you very much. Just like Councillor Wallace, just checking I'm not in mute. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee must review and control environment and make an annual statement to the Council in its evaluation of internal controls. To help with that evaluation, each year Internal Audit must provide to the committee an annual statement of adequacy and effectiveness of governance, risk management and internal control systems operating within the Council. The statement for 2021 was considered by the committee on the 23rd of September as an appendix to the 2021 Internal Audit Annual Report. Paragraph 7 of the report lists sources of information which have informed the evaluation of the control environment. As referred in paragraphs 9 to 11 of the report, Chief Auditor's opinion is that reasonable assurance can be placed upon the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk management and internal control for the year ended 31st of March 2021, except for an area concerning alleged fraud, which is still under investigation by Police Scotland and which no further information can be therefore be provided at this time. As recommended by the committee, the council is asked to note the internal audit annual statement on the adequacy and effectiveness of governance, risk management and internal control systems operating within the council attached to the report Appendix A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Are there any questions to Councillor Miller or any questions on the report or comments?
No, right.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Provost. Just a comment. I know I've mentioned over the past 18 months or so my concerns over the staffing at internal audit and the need for unnecessarily need the fact that a good number of them were moved elsewhere, the fact that they had no access to all the appropriate records. I do understand there have been very difficult circumstances as far as staffing is concerned, and for a variety of reasons, which I have to acknowledge. But I think what is significant in the report is that the words reasonable assurance were given. And I would say perhaps reasonable under the circumstances. We do recognise there has been a pandemic, but my concerns, I don't change any of my thoughts on my concerns over the internal audit and the general governance, and just hope that in time to come, everything will be rectified, that we will get the appropriate people in place in order to carry out effective auditing to the full plan and not a reserved plan or a very well cut down plan. That's just the comment I'd like to make. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
No.
Oh, can we accept that then?
Okay.
And move on to item number 12, which is the review of Treasury management practices and policy statement. Can I invite Barbara Clark to speak to that? I don't know if she wants to. But
yes, happy to introduce it, Provost, thank you. So in line with approved reporting requirements as stated in the Treasury strategy, the Chief Financial Officer reviews the Treasury management practices and policy statement as appropriate, with the last review being approved by Council in December 2017. There have been few changes made to the previously approved document. However, the Treasury management practices now include summarised information on the major financial arrangements we have with our partners and a schedule setting out a summary of existing material non-Treasury investments. Lastly, in line with a legislative framework to regulate financial markets and improve protection for investors, the report acknowledges that the Council has chosen to opt up to professional status to allow investments in the financial instruments as permitted by the Treasury strategy. All of the governance measures within these documents are adhered to.
okay, thank you very much. I'll open it up to any questions or comments anybody has. No, all content. Okay, thank you. That and move on to our last agenda item, which is an update on the COVID-19 recovery. This is really just for noting, but again, happy to take any questions or comments you may have on the report. Don't see any hands up. All content with information in the report. Councillor MacDonald.
You'll have to forgive me. I didn't read this particular agenda item, and therefore I just wanted to ask, in terms of the COVID recovery and with regards to our own council and how we operate, are there any parts within this report that deal with when we are going to return to physical meetings or a hybrid format?
Provost, I'll come in and maybe deal with that if you want.
Okay, I was just going to call you in, Mr. Daly. Thank you.
We are looking at introducing hybrid arrangements, Councillor MacDonald, and we have placed an order for the appropriate equipment to be installed in the chamber to allow that to take place. As you can probably imagine, we're not the only council across the country who are looking down the same road just now, and as a consequence of that, I think the company we're dealing with, we are the company who provide the equipment that we already have in the chamber. I've got a rather full order book, and we're sort of jockeying for position in terms of installation dates. They have given us an installation sometime early in the new year, but I'm in negotiations with them to see if we can get the possibility of some form of cancellation, so that if anybody else, for whatever reason, drops back, we can get pushed up the list. As you know, the chamber's lying empty, so we can really grant access at any time. So the sooner they get in, the sooner we can move to that hybrid working arrangement. In terms of other meetings, we have been looking at the possibility of perhaps having meetings with smaller numbers of members in person. Again, being guided by what colleagues in health and safety and environmental health say. But we have already had a couple of smaller meetings. For example, the appointments committee has met in person, and I know that there have been one or two other meetings. Clearly, for a large meeting like this, like the full council with all the attending officers, it would be very difficult for us all to fit in the chamber. But for smaller meetings, that's certainly something that we're looking at.
Now, how does that play into? I mean, my concern is more than anything, as much as I would love to share the chamber with all of you in a physical capacity, I don't really, it's more to do with the fact that the gallery and allowing public access in real time to view council meetings.
Any public meeting that took place in the chamber would be open to the public. Clearly, we would still be able to apply a limit to the numbers of members of the public that we would allow in, again, just in terms of advice from health and safety and advice from environmental health. But you know, as a matter of course, if the members were meeting in a room in person, then that the facility for members of the public to be in that meeting would also apply.
And presumably on the current guidance, we would probably be looking at proof of double vaccination or a negative COVID test to access the council chamber, is that?
We would be guided by colleagues in environmental health and health and safety on what the requirements would be.
At that time. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wallace.
Just in view of the motion that's just been carried earlier this evening, how does this meeting, again, physically fit with our climate change agenda in terms of carbon footprint? Is this not a more efficient, less carbon harmful way of meeting? Just a question. I don't know if anyone's there that could answer. Perhaps Councillor Ireland can answer that one.
Can I add a comment to that? And it's just that you're absolutely right, Gordon. You know, there's no question that what we're doing right now, conducting these meetings by computer, is far more carbon friendly than meeting in person and getting in our vehicles and travelling to the chamber and everything else. I think the consideration about holding meetings in a public forum is allowing democracy to flourish in a healthy manner, to allow people the ability in council chambers across the country to be able to access in real time council meetings. It'd be very difficult to afford the same degree in a format that we're in right now, because obviously there's all manner of different things that can take place when you invite people that are supposedly residents in East Renfrewshire to come in. How do they qualify themselves to be able to sit in on a virtual meeting like this? So that's what my concern was around, is allowing the public access to these meetings. I think it's crucial to the health of our local democracy that we have that. So you have to mitigate, I suppose, on one hand, you know, the environmental aspect, but do we also want to, you know, allow democracy to be harmed and the ability to see people perform their duties in the council chamber? I think it's important.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Councillor Merrick.
I just wanted to come back at Councillor Wallace, if I could, to ask him what the footprint would be if we were all, instead of being in separate rooms with the heating on, in one room with the heating on, etc., etc. I mean, it's a bit of a trivial point. You may have been a bit pedantic bringing that back to you. We've got to be serious about climate change, was my point.
Okay, thank you. Conscious that we have a report about COVID recovery rather than have a debate. I've
just been attacked here. Could I just respond to that, please?
Councillor Wallace.
I mean, this is exactly what I'm getting at. And when I was making my amendment earlier on, it's all lip service. You know, we talk about climate change until it maybe doesn't suit us. we're either on board with climate change or we're not. And I think the suggestion to say that are we all not better meeting in a chamber where there's one set of heating on in a room? Does Councillor Merrick turn off all his heating when he leaves the house to go to council? I don't think so. It's just a ridiculous comment. All I'm asking here is that we take serious judgments. Hybrid may well be the answer, but it's just to say that we are not paying lip service. And that was my concern earlier on this evening, and that's why I made the amendment I did. Thank you.
Okay, we won't return to that particular debate in the motion, I think. Is there any other points that anybody wants to make on the COVID recovery plan? The report that's in front of you. Okay, can we note it as there, as I say, for noting? And can I, that's the last agenda item. Thank you very much for your attendance and your forbearance this evening. And good evening.
Good evening and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Bye.